what we're speaking about today is how to solve the missing data problem that's wrecking your forecasts. Okay. Now, a quick agenda for what we're going to run through today. I'm going to get some introductions from the three of our panelists so we can get a bit more acquainted with who's going to be blessing us with their expertise and knowledge today. Secondly, I've got a couple poll questions that I want to just ask the audience so we can just see who's rocking with us, what's going on, and so on. So just bear with us for that, and then from there we'll dive into the juice of what we're all here today. We do have a Q&A piece at the end. However, we do like to address them as in real time as they come in, just because they'll be top of mind. And we can articulate the answers a bit better. So I'll loop those questions as they come in as fits. So please, again, guys, this is your chance to ask these three your burning questions on this topic. This is a workshop, so please, we want as many questions as you guys have. Right? The more questions, the more participative, the better the event. Okay, we have a lot of content to get through. However, please let us know if you have any burning questions, because this is your chance to ask. Okay. Awesome. So that's our agenda. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our fantastic panelists. So I'll start off with Alex. Alex Greer, thank you so much for joining us today. Very appreciate you taking the time to bless us with your knowledge and insights on this topic. But please, if you don't mind, just giving us a bit of background on yourself, how you came to where you are, what you're all about, so we can just get a bit more acquainted with you.
Sure. So I'm the Senior Director of Sales Operations and Sales Development here at SetSale. I've been here for my year anniversary is coming up next week. Started my tech career at Cloudera as an SDR and then handled global inside sales enablement there. Spent time at Medallia, also doing inside sales enablement and strategy. And then started a startup called Signal HQ, building a sales tool around intent data. We were acquired by Bombora. Spent some time there before joining SetSale. So that's my career in a nutshell. Really excited to be discussing this topic together with Rachel and Aaron. So thanks for hosting us.
Sweet. That's awesome. I'm really excited to hear your experiences in this realm, as I'm sure you've got a lot of insights. So Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I'll throw it over to Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and giving us your valuable time as well. So thank you so much. Please just give us a bit more background on yourself, what you're all about, so we can get a bit more acquainted.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here with Alex and Aaron, two people that I completely respect, and I'm so excited to hear everything y'all have to say about these topics. I've sat in nearly every sales seat within a sales organization, from AE to sales manager to VP of sales, but the majority of my career was spent in sales enablement for Xerox and Konica Minolta. And one day, about 4 years ago, I read a book called Gap Selling, and it changed everything for me. And so much so that I reached out on LinkedIn to Keenan, the author, and said, how can I join this circus? And next thing I knew, I was his head of sales, and got to learn how to gap sell from the master of gap selling himself, which was quite a wild ride for a couple of years. And now I have the privilege of raising up an army of gap selling certified sales trainers to bring our message to the sales world and lift everybody up. So I'm so excited. This is my favorite topic in the world. So happy to be here.
Beautiful. We're very happy to have you. And amazing. That's your favorite topic to talk about. So then everybody, get your questions going, because we got a pro here. So let's make it happen here. Okay. Well, thank you again, Rachel, so much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us the time. Last but not least, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us as well, and giving us your time. We really appreciate you hopping on. But please just give us a bit more background on yourself, what you're all about, so we can get to know you a bit better.
Thanks, Mikey. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really honored to be sitting here next to Rachel and Alex. Excited to learn with everybody else here from these two experts. my life and career journey has been an interesting one. I've covered a number of different industries. A lot of that time is spent literally knocking on doors, trying to sell either telecommunications. And back in my day, it was like DSL and landlines. I sold home security. I got into real estate for a long time. I had a lot of success. And then I tried to open my own development company, and I spent all my money on land that I couldn't sell fast enough. So I was like, where can I make money? So I got into technology. And ever since then, it's been a fantastic ride. I worked for a Salesforce consulting company that also did like fractional SDR work based in Austin, Texas. Lived there for a little while. Then I went and worked for Huddle to lead their elite sales team, which focused on like D1 colleges and pro teams. And quickly I got put into revenue operations and enablement, which I didn't know what they were because I never had any of those assets when I was growing up in my sales career. But I learned and fell in love with it really quickly, and was able to use a ton of what I learned about opportunity management, sales training best practices throughout my life to build content and build machines and systems that made it much easier for the people that I serve to be effective. And now every day, that's what I do. At Winning by Design, I'm a consultant and a trainer. So we focus primarily on working with companies that got a recent funding round at a merger and acquisition, or just really are having a hard time. They come to us asking for help. We give them consulting recommendations, and oftentimes it results in us doing training for them too. I also lead what's called the revenue architecture course for people who just want to understand recurring revenue in new ways. So I teach that on a monthly basis, and that's where I spend most of my time. But I'm happy to be here, excited to talk about this, and excited to learn with everybody.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, we're happy to have you here. And, like you mentioned, you got all the experience, right? So I'm excited to hear what you got. And I think, you're right. I think that a lot of people maybe on this call might still not have those assets or resources to kind of really make sure everything's moving forward. So I think this is why it's such a good conversation to have, right? Awesome. Okay. So that's introductions. Again, thank you three for joining us. But I just want to run a couple questions for the chat, as well as a quick poll, and then we'll dive into the juice here. So everybody, who's on the line right now? Okay, let us know your title. Where you're calling in from. Are you an SDR? Are you an AE? Are you a manager? Are you in sales ops? Success? What is it? We want to know who's hanging with us, where you're kind of sitting, so we can at least guide some of our answers in the right direction there. So great. So Michael, Andy, both sales managers. Elaine, hopefully I said that right. She's in sales enablement manager, head of sales, SDRs. All right. There we go. Thank you everybody for dropping in that info for us. So keep it coming. We want to see where everyone's sitting in the org, just so we can get a better understanding. But it does seem we've got a lot of leaders here and a lot of people in those positions that might be actually conducting these potential forecasts. So thank you all so much for joining us and giving us some insight on who is with us. Okay, great. Ronnie, Dean, Candace, awesome. Well, thank you all. Okay, cool. So we got a good idea of who's with us on the line here. So fantastic. Leslie, Strategic Enterprise AE. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Now, let me just run a quick poll here. So what in your guys' mind, hold up, sorry. There we go. I'm going to launch a quick poll. So what information indicates a deal is likely to close in your guys' mind? Okay, let me know. I'm just going to launch this quickly. Everybody can see that. There's the poll. I'll give that a little bit of time here. Sorry. Okay, critical event, size of the problem, a critical event, seniority of the contacts, number of people are involved in the process. Okay. Got votes for everything, but it looks like the size of the problem, critical event is taking it here. Okay, I'll give it a couple more seconds just to get a few more answers. Okay, and I will stop it there. Share these results for you guys. So we can see here that the runner is a critical event, and then we got the size of the problem, seniority of contacts, and then the number of people that are involved in the process. It's kind of what we thought. Do anybody on the line or any of the panelists? Do you guys have any thoughts on those responses?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. I think all these are really important factors, but I would say, in my experience, priority is key, and that's going to come down to the magnitude of what's going on and how urgent it is.
Yeah.
So I think what was said here makes a ton of sense.
Totally.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Rachel, gap selling was a game changer for me too. And you can have all sorts of people interested and all of the senior level people, but if they don't feel like it's an important enough problem to solve, then it's unlikely that there's going to be a deal closing anytime soon. So all important factors, but it starts with highlighting how big the gap is and positioning yourself accordingly.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Okay, sweet. So we got some insights here, but let's dive into it. Okay, the exciting stuff. Okay, I'm just gonna stop sharing here, guys. Give me un momento. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with a brief kind of talking point here, and Rachel, I'll start off with you just to kind of get your thoughts. So what do you think? Why are missing contacts wrecking your ability to grow accounts? How do you think, by not having the proper contacts within your CRM and so on is really affecting, expansion and growing those accounts to bring in more revenue? Rachel, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, some of it is the obvious things, right? Like, I mean, the average tenure of most positions is somewhere between 12 and 24 months. So if you only have one contact and that contact leaves the organization, then you have to start over from scratch over and over. And then the other piece is when you're prospecting specifically, each contact is going to, they have different key performance indicators that are important to them. And so these problems are going to manifest themselves in a different way for each of them. And so you've got to be able to adjust your messaging. Whereas, I used to teach everybody like go straight up to the top to the highest C level. And I still believe that you should always start at the C level, but you can't ignore like the end user and the folks in the middle either, because they're the ones who are feeling the most pain. And they're the ones most likely to connect the root cause to the business problem, where that like the higher you go, the more they just see the business problem and they're unaware of the root cause. So having all of those contacts gives you an opportunity to personalize your prospecting messaging to the appropriate person and get in a multitude of different ways, right? I mean, it's quite simple. If I have one person, I got one shot. And if I got three people, I got three shots, right? So it's just about odds. Then when you get into the sales cycle, of course, I think, we speak a lot about getting the whole buying team involved in the process. But then a lot of times the ancillary people outside of like our main one or two contacts don't actually get into the CRM, right? They show up on the Zoom meetings, they're back and forth in the contacts, but nobody actually takes the time to put them in the CRM. Well, guess what? When your contact goes dark on you and is ghosting you, guess whose contact information you now do not have to be like, yo, Aaron, like I haven't heard from Alex based on our last meeting. XYZ was going to happen to you as the sales manager. Like, can you help me out to get this thing moving along? Right. So it's like you're not utilizing all of those resources that you created in the buying process. You're not putting that information into the CRM.
I couldn't agree more. That's one best practice that I've actually incorporated. The minute I have any communication with somebody else in a deal, like goes directly into the CRM, just because I know once you're going back and forth, you could lose kind of contact and stuff like that, like just like you said. So I love that point there. Alex,
to expand on that, Rachel, too, one of the things we've been noticing talking with customers is this problem compounds when accounts change hands. So you've missed that contact, accounts change hands, for one reason or another, from one rep to another. And there's a lot of trouble with this siloed knowledge that gets lost And the rep that inherits the account is now starting from scratch. They don't know who we've engaged with in the past. And so, like Mikey, you might be one of those ultra diligent reps that is really, really good about keeping the CRM up to date. I would bet that even so, you don't maybe 100% of the time, maybe you're 99% diligent about adding those contacts.
Sure.
The challenge organizationally for sales leaders that are on the line, the enablement leaders, the VPs of sales, the ops leaders, is at scale across all of your reps, how frequently is this happening? And as accounts change hands and you're still working on these opportunities, or as the closed won business of a new customer changes hands to the account manager and the customer success rep, how often are we having to start from scratch because we don't really have the full picture of who all we've engaged with?
Mm. Yeah.
Love that. I think both of your comments are super valid. You've got Rachel talking about the multiples and the scale and the unit economics is really important. The more people you have access to, the higher the probability of success. Alex talked a little bit about the fact that you don't know when those things are going to change, right? Whether it's internal or external, we've got moving parts and variables, and I think the data backs this stuff up. It's really interestingly, we have a real fortune as consultants to be able to look at a lot of customers' data, and we were able to put together a couple sample sets of some pretty robust data sets to determine what truth there is here and what we're perceiving and feeling qualitatively about the number of people we have and the likelihood of success. And on slide 7, which we're going to pull up here in a second, it talks about the number of accounts that are actually listed, or number of contacts listed on an account, and how it changes or impacts the probability of having a response. Just like Rachel alluded to, if you got one person, you got one shot. But if you have more than that, it does increase your probabilities of communication. Mikey, is that something we can pull up really quick? That slide that says account response rate. Just so we can look at that.
There you go.
Yeah, so what y'all can see here, this is actually from an extract that I did. Shout out to Arnie Gulafsing, who was not on the call, but he and I worked together on this project. And what we found was that there's about a 10% chance of getting a response when you just had one account or one contact on the account. But for this particular set of clients, we saw that almost triple as you had 3 to 5 people in those accounts that were listed as contacts. And then it doubled again when you went to 6+. So we saw a huge increase in the likelihood of getting communication back from those customers, the more contacts we actually had in those accounts. And this isn't just about getting a response to our initial outreach. The same story is told when you talk about converting those accounts into actual opportunities. The next slide that we have just really quickly shows a very similar story about accounts opportunity conversion rates. So this isn't about wins. This is those that actually go from being not qualified ops to becoming qualified ops. And you see that going from that one contact even to 3 to 5 as a 50% increase in the probability of becoming an opportunity. And then we also see that take place again going from 3 to 5 to 6+. So there's a very clear data backed up truth that the more contacts we have on these accounts, there is a much higher probability of it progressing those customers, which if we're not progressing a deal or conversation, we're definitely not going to turn it into money. So this is a very clear indication of what y'all are saying is true.
Fair enough. As you all work with your clients, have you set these up as KPIs that you advise them to track?
Absolutely. We typically do it both through a qualitative and a quantitative approach. So we're going to say, hey, there's certain benchmarks of contacts you're going to look for. We indicate what's best practice versus what's ideal. And then we obviously want to talk about the qualitative stuff too, which is, okay, if we have multiple contacts, what do we do with them? And I think Rachel was really great in saying, hey, you're going to message an end user or an initiator in the buying process very differently than you would somebody who's a strategic decision maker or a strategic leader in the business, because their priorities are different, but you've got to have a balanced approach to both. So absolutely, we're going to look at, hey, not only how many do we need to establish that benchmark, but what kinds of roles do we want? And if we have them, what are we going to say to them? And why is multi-threading so valuable? And this does back up that data for us.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's just like kind of a thought, having more people on a potential opportunity because there's more visibility on the other end is like an indicator for why you get more kind of response rates? Or what do you think on that?
I mean, what we found was that, this was all done within a pretty tight window of time. So even to address, Joseph's question too, these are when we're using multiple sequences or cadences across various parties within a similar period. So we found that, of course, the more that you have and the more diverse that population is, the more success you have. And we can think about that and have gut impressions as to why it would work, but the data is very clear. If you are approaching many roles and many people, something's going to resonate, and it's going to turn into an internal conversation too.
Cool.
Just make sure you don't send them all the same message.
Right.
Yes.
Or you're going to be annoying and they're going to hate you.
Oh,
I think a lot of times when we talk about these things, I know there's a lot of enablement folks on the line, and we talk a lot about the what. And I feel like, yeah, we have fancy charts and all these things, but I think like instinctually, this just makes sense, right? Like this isn't like rocket science. The challenge from an enablement standpoint is like, how do we get our sales team to buy in to putting this information into the machine, right? And I think where we go wrong is we do this. We have this type of like conversation, and then we start, requiring people to put this many contacts in, and like we don't give enough of like the why and the what's in it for them, and helping them understand that, like, getting them excited about the fact that, hey, like if your customer goes dark on you, like, which is the most annoying thing, right? And it's the number one reason we lose is to status quo, and we think it's great, and we have all the data, we have all our budget, timing, all that shit in there, and then the person just like disappears. Well, guess what? Like if you have all of that information in the CRM and all of the different contacts, then you can be really strategic about bringing that conversation back into the light, and that's going to happen to you significantly less. I think the other thing is, like, salespeople, we trust our memory like way too much. We think that we are going to remember things that we are never going to remember. And so they think they're holding a lot of this information in their head. A lot of them have notepads sitting next to them, and they have like pages and pages of notes that later don't make any sense, right? And so I think addressing the why they're not putting the information in, and being really strategic as leaders in inspiring them and getting them excited about using these tools, the data tools, to help them sell more, as opposed to, because they think that you want them to put it in so that you have the contact, so that when they are fired, you can still get in the account. That's why they think that we want the information in there. And too often it's not communicated to them the value of, hey, if you don't close this 9 months from now, when you don't even remember this person, you can go in and like have all the notes on like 5 different people within the organization, and whoever's still there, like, you can reach out to them. The other thing I would offer is, if you have 5 people on a meeting, you should automatically follow up with all 5 people. So too often we follow up with one of the people, and maybe we CC everybody else on that email. I don't do that. Like, I follow up individually, speaking to something that person said was important to them, and like how the problem is manifesting to that person individually. Because what also happens is the reps, they get scared to communicate with someone other than the decision maker when things aren't moving along, because they feel like, oh, they're going to get mad at me, or they're going to think I'm jumping over their heads, right? I'm going to ruin the deal if I go around them. But if you open up that conversation right from the beginning, then it's not weird when, like, a month later, you're like, hey, Sally, remember we met, and like blah, 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 and Bob's not responding, right? So you can kind of set up this precedent that you're going to communicate with everyone right out the gate. And if they communicate with everyone, well, guess what happens? If you have a sales tool, right, then it all is going to create a contact for that person attached to that opportunity, and nobody has to just put it in, right? Because your emails are attached. So just like teach them how to use it in a way that works for them, and you'll get the data that you need.
Yeah. No, I love that point too, right? And you said it perfectly, where, if you have multiple people on the line that are having the conversation, they all have different priorities to potentially working with you, and different needs and different kind of outcomes that they want, right? And then even if they aren't the champion, they have a ton of influence on the champion's decision, right? So it's, like, I love how you said that, where following up directly with each individual separately and focusing on their specific pain is, best practice and will help you move the deal a lot quicker. Cool. Yeah. So I would love to hear, I know we got Rachel, but Aaron, I know you just answered in the Q&A, but Alex, how have you been able to enforce, or encourage your teams to kind of make sure that they're updating the CRM religiously?
Well, truthfully, that was one of the things that really drew me to Set Sail is, it can really feel like pulling teeth working with the reps, no matter how much in an enablement capacity you try to highlight all of the value it is to enter this information. There are some things that now, technology-wise, such as Set Sail, that can deburden the rep from having to take that time and will automatically do it on their behalf. Mm-hmm. So that's been really transformational as we've used Set Sail here internally, and as we work with customers, is any contact that we're engaged with and reaching out to, that automatically gets populated. Even for the folks that aren't using a sales engagement tool, it's still automatically populating to the right account, the right open opportunity in the CRM, as well as all of their meetings and interactions. And so this is a great KPI, Aaron, that I'd love to help build internally here in order for us to accurately reflect those numbers. Those contacts need to be populating, and luckily for us, with our technology, it's happening. In the absence of that, we would have to go around to the reps, and that becomes a combination of enablement, highlighting why it's valuable and teaching it as a best practice, but ultimately, you need the individual sales managers overseeing the reps to help reinforce that behavior and make sure that it's happening. So to the extent that it can be automated, it's really, really a huge relief and a lifesaver, and allows it to happen much more scalably. Otherwise, you've got a little bit of work cut out for you to encourage that manual entry.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Okay, let's move on. Love this. This is fantastic, guys. Okay, so next kind of point we want to touch on here, and Aaron, I'll start with you to kind of kick us off, but how have you been able to measure the opportunity progress, maturity, and how can you improve that? So would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to determine how close you are to an opportunity actually closing is all around the sense of urgency. We talked in the beginning about how important priority is, and anybody who's used in the past an Eisenhower matrix to think about how they spend their time or what they should be doing understands that the balance of importance and urgency is typically what's indicative of what we should be doing with our time. And so when people decide anything, they're thinking not only about the magnitude of how big of a problem it is, but how pressing is it to do something about it today? And oftentimes, if we're not measuring that level of urgency, we're going to see some things happen to our opportunities that are very common and yet very frustrating, whether it's as a salesperson or as a leader. I mean, I think many of you have probably shown up into a pipeline review or a one-on-one, and all of a sudden the close date's totally different than what it was before the meeting. It's like, oh yeah, I got pushed out a couple of weeks. Or you show up at a pipeline report and you see every deal's closing the 30th of the month, at the 31st of the month. We've all been there. We've all seen those close dates show up that way. And typically that happens because we don't actually understand that critical event that's driving the customer to do something. They may have indicated a timeline to us in our initial discovery, but we haven't confirmed the consequences of inaction, nor have we gotten them to admit that it's not something they're willing to tolerate. So if you want to pull up just slide 11 really quick, Mike, I think this is kind of an interesting story. 11, if you could, the next one down, actually. You just kind of look at this table, and if we're doing a good job of identifying timeline, or if you have like BANT as a framework that you use to qualify opportunities, where you're thinking about budget, authority, needs, and timeline, you may have an idea of when they want to get something done. Oh, it's got to be done in Q1. It needs to be done this month. Oh, if it's not done this week, we got a big problem. Great. Okay. But what is the problem? We got to ask those questions and identify, okay, what does that actually mean if it's not done? What's the consequence of not having this done? If they can articulate that to us, it's differentiating it from a generic timeline, just an idea of a target date, to an actual timeline associated with a consequence. But even in those situations, it's not near enough. We have to know that they're unwilling to tolerate that consequence. It has to be unacceptable. That is what makes these events critical. And when you have close dates that are tied to like a work back schedule, like if it's done at this point, that enables this, which enables us to have a solution in place to prevent this disaster from occurring that we all agree can't happen, that close date is way more likely to be on target. In fact, the studies we've done have shown that it's 80% more likely to close within that target date if there's a critical event attached than not. And so we like to lean into this. And if you visualize this concept of what it means, you can kind of look quickly at slide 10, the one you just had up on the board. Sorry about that. And we've all been there too, where we've talked to those customers like what Rachel was talking about. We've sent our proposals off and then we don't hear anything. They go dark for a long time. And all they were really doing was learning about what was out there. And we follow up, we don't hear anything. Well, then they experience something really bad. And now that they're fully educated buyers, they don't have that tolerance anymore. They now know better. And because they went through that, they're more willing to come back and say, hey, can I get a quote from you? Even though you already sent them one 2 months ago, you're like, what is happening? And of course, that deal closes in like 2 days. And you're like, oh man, that was like the fastest sales cycle ever. When in reality, it's the same sales process. They just weren't ready yet to say they weren't willing to tolerate the consequence. So this is just a visualization of what we see critical events doing to help ensure that process moves more effectively. Alex, did you have a comment?
I was going to ask both of you, Rachel and Aaron, the consequences is such a huge piece. Are there certain phrases or statements that you're keeping your eyes and ears open for or seeking to uncover that are indicative of those consequences? What types of things are you looking for the customer to say that is indicative of that?
Yeah, Rachel, I don't want to monopolize it. Do you have anything you want to share first?
No, go ahead.
Cool. So you'll see that impact is highlighted here. I like to think about impact really in 2 ways. There's the idea of emotional impact, the way that people feel about things that are happening, whether they're good or bad, and how it affects their emotions, their day-to-day processes. And then there's also rational impacts, things that we can quantify, things that are measurable, typically things that impact the business because they're at scale and things that we can measure. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about how do I pick out that impact, you want to listen to feeling language. If you're talking to someone, are they saying things like annoyed, frustrated, it's difficult, it's taxing, it's just not easy, it sucks, it's crappy? You know, there's all these kinds of words they're going to say that tells you how they feel about what's going on, which means that there's something that resonates to them on an emotional level, which is great. But oftentimes that's not enough to get the business to decide. So if there's that, plus they say, well, we have an initiative in place that needs to get done, or we're trying to measure this particular metric, and they attach something that they're trying to evaluate that is business centric. If we can find both of those things, we can typically latch onto that and ask, okay, well, you said that this is an important metric to you. What happens if by this particular time that you targeted, that's not done? What does that mean to your business? And they'll start to tell us the consequences. But we have to ask once we pick up on those little questions or comments that they say.
So what I would offer here is when we think about where an account is in the pipeline, we have 3 questions. Does the customer have a problem that we solve? Do they admit they have a problem? And the last one is, are they willing to go on the journey to fix it? And I think us as salespeople, we oftentimes have people come to us and we ask them their problems, and we try to suss out if they have some sort of timeline to fix it. So the first thing I want to look at is if I'm a sales leader and I have to forecast, I'm going straight to the CRM, and what I'm looking for, if somebody tells me this deal is closing, I am looking for the business problem. So when we talk about problems, we need to separate those 2 things out, because reps think that they are putting data in that reflects the problem, but what they're doing is they're reflecting the technical process problem that they have, the missing tool or the broken process. But that is not why the customer buys. So if I'm going in and someone's projecting a deal is going to close and I don't see in the CRM the business problem that this broken tool or broken process is causing, then I can tell you that that deal is not closing. It's not closing because if the rep doesn't know the business problem that this broken tool or process is causing for them, I guarantee you the client does not know that this broken tool or process is causing this business problem and this business impact.
Mhm.
So from a forecasting standpoint, like that's what I'm looking for. Is the business problem in there? Is it quantified? Can I see the impact? As Aaron said, what is the cost? Like how big is the pain of change? And not just financially, but emotionally and from a workflow standpoint, right? How large is the pain of change in relation to the pain of staying the same? And that's our job as salespeople, is to help the client understand that piece before we ever start talking about our products or solutions. So if you're going into the CRM and you don't see root cause, problem, business impact laid out within the discovery notes, then and someone's projecting it's going to close, then they, why do they think it's going to close? What is that based on? And if you're using things like BANT and stuff like that, it's usually based on like crap. It's based on the customer told me there's this timeline. The customer told me there's this budget. So like a seller creates budget. A seller creates timeline. A seller creates the critical event. If they knew all these things, then everyone would buy things online and they would never need you. Mm-hmm. So, I think thinking about this, you have to understand that before you're going to get the right data, you're going to have to change the behavior of your sellers. Otherwise, the data that's in there is just going to be garbage.
I love that. I really liked how you put that. And I think it's like, you're so right. I think there's like underplaying in the discovery process, right? It's like a lot of reps just kind of do the discovery call and then, okay, this sounds good, hand it off, right? Whereas like the deeper you dive, the more information you uncover, the better chances, like you said, of it actually closing. So I feel like there's a lot of reps out there that are honestly sometimes like scared to ask those questions and dive deeper into the conversation with that potential client. But in the long run, it's going to pay off if you get the right information out, right? Cool. We have a question from Axel in the chat here. I want to quickly just ask the three of you. So he asked, would a MEP or mutual engagement plan help clarify the timeline, buying cycle, and correct impact on the deal? He says, I believe it would also help us understand if we are actually aligned with those who have the ability to sign off on the deal. What are your thoughts? And I'll start with you, Alex, on that one.
Ooh, can I punt? Because I don't have a ton of experience using like a mutual engagement plan tool and would love to hear what the others have to say.
Sure. Aaron, Rachel, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Rachel, all yours. I'm happy to take it afterwards, though. Go ahead.
So I would say that if you're in a larger type of enterprise sale, then a mutual engagement plan of some sort might make sense. What I will offer is that when I see this done, it's done very poorly. So if it's for the benefit of the customer so that they know what's coming next and so that they understand what the process looks like, and it's based on them specifically and what you uncovered in discovery, then I could see where that would be valuable. But in most cases, I'm going to say that this is kind of sales standardly old school stuff that is unnecessary and maybe adds a little friction into the sales process. What I would offer instead is that all of your follow-up and all of your like your proposal, like my proposals, they lay out, like when I look at our clients' proposals, it's like 5 pages of shit about them and their product that like the client is just going to the last page to see the price. And understanding that, that proposal is like likely going to be handed off to somebody who was not in your meetings and who was not in all of these discussions. So what I would offer instead of mutual engagement plans like I said, unless you're like in some crazy enterprise across the whole, like that sort of thing. What I would offer is put in your proposals the business problem, the impact they're having, the root cause of the problem, and how specifically the features of your product align to addressing each of those root causes, and then have your recommendation and the investment after that. So that way you are making sure that everything that you do is really focused on them. And same with like your follow-up, right? Always be kind of coming back to anchoring them in what we're solving for here and telling them what the next step is or what the next yes is within the process. But I don't know, a mutual engagement plan is kind of cheesy to me. I know I'm going to get hate. They're going to come for me.
No, I think this is great. Like, my take is a bit different, but I think everything Rachel said has tremendous value. Typically, what I've found is like if the deal's not worth 50 grand a year in terms of pricing, absolutely not. Do not waste the time trying to build a plan. If it's more than $50,000, it starts to make sense, but it's totally dependent on what Rachel said. It's all about customer centricity. If they need to organize their process for buying, or if they need an education on what's required to make this decision effectively in their business, then build it for them. But a lot of times, you got to remember, 70% of the customers buying is done before you ever talk to them. So they've generally thought a lot about this already, and they probably have some idea in their mind of what this is going to look like. One of the things that we get confused about, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, is like, we build sales processes and we have sales activities. We do all these sales things. None of that crap even matters. At the end of the day, buyers buy. Sales is just to helping people enable their own buying process. How do we get them to do something and stick to it? And so I think to the extent that you're helping an organization or a person navigate it in a way that they visually need to consume that, terrific. Provide value in that way if it makes the experience better. But it's not going to make or break the deal. All it's going to do is enable them to have information they may not already have. And if they already do, you're just duplicating work, which is not a desired experience anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I love that. Those are amazing insights. Those are fantastic. And thank you both for that. Okay. We have about 10 minutes left and we have two more things that we want to get through. Okay. So we'll get through them quickly and make sure everyone's off at the top of the hour here. But just 1 second here. So, okay. Our next talking point that we want to get through, we got two more. So I'll start with you, Rachel. What data do you need to verify opportunity strength, or how do you overcome rep bias?
So, I mean, I think a lot of the things that we've spoken about, right? So, for me, like the opportunity strength is going to be driven by the size of the gap between where they are today and where they want to go. And if the cost of change is smaller or bigger than the pain of same, right? And so like that's what I'm looking for when I'm talking about like opportunity strength. Mm-hmm. Of course, like that you have multiple people, right? We know that there's no one person that's making decisions in an organization. So I'm definitely going to look at, are there multiple people involved? One of the things that we do from a leadership perspective, when reps are taking a deal through the cycle, we always ask them, what's the next yes? And that is so different than what's the next step. Okay. So the next step is a thing like I have another meeting, like the next step is we have a meeting on Tuesday with Bob, right? But when you start to ask the reps, what's the next yes? They start to fall apart. Meaning, if Aaron is my prospect, I need, and I'm saying, what's the next yes with Aaron? It's like, what do I need to get him to admit or think before this deal is going to move forward, right? So maybe I need Aaron to see and understand that until he enables his sales managers to be better coaches and developers of people, it doesn't matter what else he does, he's not going to hit this revenue target. And I need Aaron to see that, understand that, and admit that his situation is untenable, right? And so like keep driving this opportunity, make it stronger as a leader and as enablement, we're always like, what is the next yes? What do I need this prospect to say or do or feel or admit in order to in order to get it to move forward? But other than that, it just comes down to, when you look in the CRM, like, I should be able to look, if a deal's going to close and it's strong, the sales manager or the sales enablement person should be able to go into the CRM and tell you, I can be able to tell everything about the problem, impact, root cause, just by the notes that are in there. And if I can't, then I'm like calling crap on you telling me this thing is going to close.
Yeah. No, that's great. I like that. I love the point that what's the next yes. That's great. Alex, Aaron, do you guys have any other additional thoughts to add?
I was going to ask Rachel, when you're working with clients, are you helping them tailor like the series of yeses to look for, and then also having like fields on the opportunity associated with those for them to apply notes in order to measure it and forecast off of it from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So like part of like what we do in the consulting piece in our business is we make sure that their CRM, that even their revenue intelligence tools like are built out from like a gap selling perspective. And we actually like partner with different, tech tools to help them like align, right? So we help build their the sequences built out in a gap selling perspective. Like our Salesforce is completely built out, templated of like, here is the business, root cause, impact, physical and literal information, next yes. And then like when I sit in my pipeline meetings with Keenan, it's always the last question, which is like, what's the next yes? Right. And to me, it's like, yeah, we can automate a lot of these things, but it's also about like training the salespeople to think in this way, right? I know that I cannot show up to a pipeline meeting without that information, or I'm going to get my ass handed to me, right? I have to be able to answer the questions. We open the CRM with our clients and we go, great, what's forecasted? And then we start breaking it down. All right, tell me about this one, right? And we start asking, what's the next yes? And we train the frontline sales leaders to do their pipeline meetings in that way, and to use the CRM and bring it up within the pipeline meetings and dive into the accounts in that way, so that the reps know what to expect. And so you're driving the behavior and the data at the same time, all completely aligned to your sales process. It's pretty magical.
I love it.
when it's done.
Amazing. Okay. I think we should move on to the last topic here. We only have 5 minutes left, and I want to give you guys some time to regroup before your next meeting coming up. But so Aaron, do you mind if we just jump over this slide here?
Yeah, skip it. We don't have time for this.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, last one I want to start with here, and Alex, I'll kind of get you to kick it off just to end us here. But why is executive alignment critical? How can that be automated?
Yeah, on that one, I'd say that one pops up more frequently with enterprise sales, those greater than $50,000 type transactions, or in a smaller organization that you're selling to, maybe it's $25,000 plus where the executives get aligned. But we found that is another indicator of opportunity strength, that as the seller, if your executive team is engaged with the customer's executive team, that helps strengthen the buy-in and the relationship, especially, cultivating a longer term relationship with the customer. The challenge has always been, how do you get record of the fact that has happened? Again, it often is subject to manual entry at best, if it's something that you're asking the reps to record in some fashion. Again, that's something that drew me to SetSale, is our capacity to be able to record that at scale, and still have a lot of privacy controls in place to counteract making sure that none of the other really sensitive communications that an executive is having aren't getting recorded. So that's how we've been helping both internally and our customers solve for that. So it's exciting to see technologies emerge that are capable of automating that. But regardless of whether you have a tool like that installed or not, certainly for the larger enterprise deals, it's very helpful to be able to indicate that that has happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Rachel, Aaron, any additional thoughts to that?
I just say one little trick that we've done as we have crafted like opportunity or deal stages, you can make a trigger when you reach a certain stage that like notifies your executive to reach out to a corresponding contact role. It's been assigned as like an executive buyer. This is like super technical, nerdy stuff, but that's just one way that we found that if our senior leader likes to react to tasks, then you can tee it up that way where it's like, oh, moving into this stage now, and then that means they're ready to be notified. And then it just prompts them to send a message out, say, hey, I'm excited we're working together with you on a potential opportunity. We'd love to talk to you offline, whatever. And we've seen some success with that.
Awesome. By the way, executive alignment doesn't always have to happen in late stage deal cycles. Putting my SDR hat back on, I mentioned I started my career at Cloudera. Lars Nilsson gave me that opportunity, if you know that name. Yeah. And we were really big into account-based sales development. We started ghostwriting sequences, account-based sales development sequences, CEO to CEO, or C-suite to C-suite, and getting executive alignment right from jump and kicking off the opportunity that way. So if it's isn't something that you've thought about on your teams out there in the audience, it's really, really magical when you put those together and see success with it. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Amazing. Okay, guys. Well, we are at time. We have 3 minutes left, but I'm going to give that back to you to kind of get ready, maybe have a glass of water before your next meeting or whatever it is. But Alex, Aaron, and Rachel, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today, giving us an hour of your day to bless us with this knowledge. I learned so much. I can't wait to kind of see what I can do with this information. But everybody, if there's any questions or anything that we didn't get to that you didn't get answered, please go follow Alex, Aaron, and Rachel on LinkedIn. Shoot them a message, ask them any questions that you might have. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer. And again, Set Sail, thank you so much for sponsoring this event. They're doing some really cool stuff, everybody. So go check them out. But without further ado, I'll let the three of you go. Again, thank you all so much.